All right, let's talk about DIs, using DIs to record bass and guitar, and the difference between active and passive DIs. All right, so originally I sat down to record a video all about recording your guitars and bass at home, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that next week, and for now I'm going to talk about DIs specifically because I feel like that could be a whole topic for a whole video by itself. So here we are, we're going to talk about DIs. So I have a passive DI here, and I also have an active DI, and we're going to talk about both of these today, what the difference is, and we're also going to talk about DIs in general and why we use them with our guitars and our bass. So if you, for example, are gigging, you might have noticed that people often use these on stage. They'll plug their instrument in and then they'll use that to run to the soundboard. You might have also noticed people using these while recording. We often use this while recording in larger studios, whereas some smaller interfaces, if you're working at home, might have a jack where you can plug your instrument directly into the interface. But what that is basically the DI is built into your interface. So if you have a jack that says it's made for an instrument, maybe it has a little guitar symbol above it, then you're all good. You don't necessarily need to buy one of these. You have one built into your interface. But when we're plugging into a soundboard that's made to have a whole bunch of microphones plugged into it, for example, or we're plugging into equipment in a studio, we often use this for reasons that we're going to talk about. So one thing to keep in mind, I have these two examples here. These radial DI boxes are kind of considered the workhorse DIs. You know, you see these in every studio. You see these on stage all the time. They're really good DIs, but it is good to keep in mind that different DIs will get you different tones, right? So I also have a Neve DI that I like to use most of the time because I like the Neve sound. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of similar to with microphones. People get a collection of them sometimes because they like how different ones sound for different purposes. So when we talk about DIs and why we use DIs, the essential concept here is what signal level you're working with, right? So in audio, we kind of have a few main types of signal level. So we have microphone level, we have instrument level, and then we also have line level. And with line level, we have what's kind of more of a consumer line level, which is -10 dBV. And then we also have a more professional, quote unquote, professional line level that's +4 dBU. And yes, those are two different units of decibels. So keep that in mind. But, the one is louder than the other. It is what you would expect there. So without going into too much detail here on a video that's mostly about DIs, it's good to keep in mind that microphone level is the quietest level, and then instrument level is in the middle, and then line level is the loudest level. So we want to be conscious of what we're working with so that we can work with it properly and not mess things up in terms of our it's actually like hardware gain staging, right? In terms of how we're working with our equipment. So with that said, what DIs are made to do is they take your instrument level, which remember is that middle tier of loudness, and it actually brings it down to microphone level so you can plug it into a microphone preamp. So we use DIs to go from our instrument, step it down a bit, and then be ready to plug into a preamp, for example, on a large soundboard, right? So that's what they're made for. They're basically just made to shift the level for you so that you can then plug into what you want to plug into. So if you hadn't watched this video and you didn't know what you were doing, right, you might accidentally see that like a jack on a piece of equipment is the same type of jack that your guitar would take, right? And you might be like, oh, okay, I can plug my guitar into that jack. But if that jack is at line level, for example, which is much louder than our instrument or our microphone levels, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a weak and a noisy signal when you plug your instrument directly into that. So that's why you want to be very conscious. You don't want to just look at the jack type. You want to actually know what your inputs are on your device. So that's why I was saying, if it has a little guitar symbol or if it says it's made for instruments, then you're good. Otherwise, you might not be good. It might be a line level input that you're looking at. So you don't want to plug a guitar into a line level. Similarly, you don't want to plug in instrument level or a line level into a mic input, right? Because a mic input is made for a much lower signal level, and then you're going to have it be too loud. It's going to be noisy. It's going to be distorted, right? It's going to clip. It's going to distort. It's going to overload. You're going to have a really, really tough time getting a nice clean signal if you're plugging something that's either instrument level or line level into a microphone input. And sometimes, especially on our little interfaces, we have jacks that can either be 1/4 inch or they can be XLR. And so that's why you want to be very aware of how your equipment works. If it has a way to recognize what you're plugging into it and switching automatically, then you're good. But a lot of times on these devices, we have a little button, right, where you switch between mic or instrument depending on what you've plugged in. So if you're plugging your guitar, for example, into a jack that can be either XLR or 1/4 inch, you want to make sure that if there's a button there to press to switch it to instrument level, that you have done so. And, you know, kind of along the same thought, right? Not totally related to the DIs, but that's why you don't want to use a mic input for your keyboard, for example. If it's coming out at line level, or if you're sending something out of some piece of equipment at line level, you don't want to be plugging into a microphone input. You want to be conscious of what different inputs are made for on your device. So again, DIs help us manage that input level, and we have the passive and we have the active, right? And so the big differences here are that passive DI boxes, which is direct input, right, is what DI stands for. So with passive DI boxes, there is no power needed. You don't need to run signal out to the DI box to run it. So you might notice, for example, on my active DI box, I actually have, there's a light here for phantom power, right? So there's a 48V check. 48 volts is phantom power, right? So it'll light up when I send the power to it to run it, because this one does need power, right? The active DI box needs power to run. Passive DI box does not need power to run. So with this one, you're never going to need batteries. You're never going to need to be able to send power out to it. It's a little more versatile in that way. And so for that reason, it's a little simpler. It's a little more reliable and durable. And passive DI boxes can also handle a higher signal level. And the general rule here is that if you have a passive DI box, ideally, you don't have to do this. It's not going to be the end of the world, but ideally, you want to pair a passive DI box with an instrument that has active electronic components, and you want to pair an active DI box with an instrument that has passive electronic components. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're looking at which to get, you want to look at what your instrument is, you know, and if you have multiple instruments, maybe you want to get one of each. You know, if you have both types of instruments, maybe get one of each. And basically what you're risking if you plug in, for example, a guitar that has passive electronic components into something like a passive DI box, is you're just going to have like a little less power, a little, your high frequencies, you might lose a little bit of the high frequencies. You're pairing passive with passive, so you might just be losing a little bit of that high frequency detail. That's it. And sometimes that's not so bad, right? Like sometimes we want a warmer tone, and then you can consciously make the decision to do that, to break that rule, right? Okay, so switching to active, like we already mentioned, active basically just means that it does need batteries or phantom power run to it for it to run. So you do require that phantom power or that battery if you're going to use this. And again, the general rule, whether you break that or not, I do break this rule pretty kind of often, right? I do break it kind of often. It just kind of depends on the situation I'm in. But the general rule is that you want to pair it with an instrument that has passive electronic components. So this pairs better with those passive instruments that have a little bit of a lower output. And because it has this active circuitry, this can be a little more fragile, right? So if you're looking for something that's a little more durable for something like live gigs, you might want to try a passive DI box and see if that sounds good with your instrument, because it's going to be slightly more durable. I haven't had much issue with these breaking, but again, I have been in the studio world entirely for quite some time now. But even when I was doing live sound, you know, I didn't run into these breaking a ton. These weren't the problem in terms of equipment breaking. So that's something to keep in mind. But the active is going to be a little more fragile because of the way it's built. So I think that's kind of the basics here. I think today might be a bit of a shorty video, but I hope this helped someone out there. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your favorite DIs are in the comments below. I'll put some DIs in the description, like these two, which are, you know, kind of a staple type of DI. And then I'll also put the Neve one that I like to use in the description below. So I'm going to film a video that's all about how to record your guitars or your bass at home so that you can save some time and money in the studio. So you can get some good takes in the comfort of your own home and have those ready to go, send those to your engineer, and then save that time and money that would have been spent in the studio otherwise. So keep an eye out for that video next week. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'd appreciate all of that stuff. I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/CatoNoise, and my patrons get additional content. So we have a Discord server we're hanging out on. We have early release videos on the Patreon. We're doing a book club on the Discord server. It's stuff like that. I have some additional content on my website as well. The big thing that we've been focusing on is the Discord server lately. So if you want to join us, please feel free to check that out. And I come out with new videos every Wednesday, and thank you so much for hanging out. Okay.